Okay. Yes, we are going to study about case studies. Have you heard about this term? Yes? Case studies. Yes, Meghna?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now, case studies, they are not like the other methods that we learn. They are somewhat, they stand differently from the rest of the methods that we have learned. Case study is all about in-depth understanding of a particular case. Understood. We select a particular event, a particular behavior, or a particular person, or a particular group, and then um, have an in-depth study, collect in-depth knowledge about this particular single person or single event or so. Grishma and Sana, please switch on your videos. I can't see you. Ashish also. Okay, let's see what case studies are. Yes. A method in which one person is studied in depth. Here, the emphasis is given on in depth study of a particular case. I already told you that. This can be related to an individual with distinguishing characteristics, for example, a patient showing psychological disorders or a small group of individuals having some commonality among them, for example, creative writers, institutions that is poorly or successfully working school or corporate office, and specific events that is children exposed to devastation by tsunami, war, etc. The ones given in the bracket are examples. So the case studies, they can be done based on maybe a single person, maybe a small group of individuals who have something in common, and it might be related to institutions, that is a single institution or a group of institutions again who has something in common. Then it might be related to specific events, and the examples are given. We'll discuss that with each example. Yes, so again, this can be related to an individual with distinguishing characteristics. For example, a patient showing psychological disorder. So we might study a person who has depression from his age of say 20. From age 20, we are studying this particular case. We collect as much as information that we want from this particular person regarding his social functioning, regarding his day-to-day activities, regarding his education, regarding his family history, regarding his childhood, regarding the other family members, his friends, his hobbies, all such information is collected from this particular person. So why we are doing this particular case study is to understand this psychological disorder in depth. Here in this example, we have depression. So regarding depression, we study this particular case. We take this case and we study that in depth. That is how case study is done. Hmm. Do we have anybody waiting? Okay. And another set of people or other set of factors in which case study is done is a small group of individuals having some commonality among them. For example, creative writers. We have different authors who write novels, the fictional part, or the poems and all. And we take some of the creative writers and we study them. And that forms our case. We study how the creativity part is developed in them or how they express their creativity. We study that based on their cases. So we'll have to study each creative writer in person to understand the whole case. So first one we saw a single case, that is regarding a psychological disorder, which is an example. Then we can also study a small group of people. based on any common factor. That here we are looking at the example of creative writers. Then we can also study institutions. Suppose, imagine there has been an institution like an educational institution who, I mean, which has been serving, which has been educating students for more than 100 years. Hmm? And then we are interested to learn how has this particular educational institution become so much successful. How what are the strategies that the management of the institution uses to teach or educate the students? How what are the managerial techniques that they use in order to remain successful all through these years, and how do they successfully continue to provide this education? We will be interested to know all that factors, right? So we can either study a particular case, that is a single person. We can take a small group of people and study, that is make a case study. Then we can also focus on institutions. Then what next? We can also focus on specific events. For example, children exposed to devastation by tsunami, war, etc. That is also a special case. Similarly, I told you about post-flood research. We can also do that based on case studies. We can take separate cases and we can study how the flood has affected these particular people. Understood? So in these, all these things, we can conduct case studies. That is on a single person, on a small group of people who have something in common, then based on institutions, then we can also study specific events. Now, a case study might use multiple methods. So how do we collect information in case studies? Case study is itself a method, but suppose we are studying only a particular case, and again, we go back to our example of depression. So how do I collect information from this person? I'll have to, either I'll have to observe him or her. Yes. Then, which are the other ways of collecting information from a single person? Who can tell me? Elvina, can you?
Um, by surveys,
Surveys, yes. Survey means I give
such
a questionnaire and then I can get information. What form of
like
survey would you use?
interview
Interviews, then
or questionnaire surveys.
questionnaire surveys, yes. And any other methods that we can study more about the person? Yes, Raina, do you have anything to contribute? No? Okay, think. Anybody else? Grishma, Sana, do you have anything? No. Okay, yeah. Interview basically, if it is with a single person, then we would probably use interviews or questionnaires. We can also use observation to understand his or her behavior. Yeah, experiments. Yes, at times we can also conduct experiments. And another important method that we learned yesterday, psychological testing. We can use psychological tests to test depression, level of depression, the feelings, the mood, the emotional content. We can learn all that through psychological testing also. So when we do case studies, we can use all these methods in a combination. That is one of the advantage of case studies. We can use several other methods in a combination when we conduct a case study. And usually when we when we talk about the term case study, usually they refer to a single case. Hmm? And it is to be understood that we also study the small group of people, the institutions and events. But usually, in general terms, case study means studying a specific case or a particular person. Understood? Yes. Then, case studies provide a narrative or detailed descriptions of the events that take place in a person's life. Freud's psychoanalytic theory and Piaget's cognitive developmental theory are all based on several case studies. So remember Sigmund Freud? Yes or no? Anybody who remembers Sigmund Freud? No? The iceberg theory? Anybody? No? Don't you remember the iceberg theory? The consciousness, the above the sea level, the consciousness part, the awareness part. Yes, Meghna, do you remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory, we studied that in the schools of psychology, the first chapter. And in Freud's theory was based on many case studies that he did, and the Piaget's cognitive development theory. There is something called cognitive developmental theory in the developmental psychology or human development in that branch. We have Jean Piaget, and he has come up with a theory based on children's developmental stages. And those theory, this particular theory, cognitive developmental theory, this was brought up, or this was formulated based on his own case studies on his own children. Okay. Okay, he did case studies on his own children, and that's how he came up with the cognitive developmental theory. Those are just given as examples in our textbook, and these two theories are mentioned because we have to understand how case studies are important for psychology. In clinical psychology, in neuropsychology and all, case studies are very, very, very important. That's why the two theories examples are given here. Now, usually it is recommended that information should be collected using multiple strategies from different sources of information by a number of investigators. So I told you about an example of the case which we are studying about depression. Hmm? And based on only this single case, if we generalize the results that we get from the study to the entire patients who are depressed, then that won't be right. Because this person has his or her way of doing things, his or her way of experiences in life, his or her past histories, the family members differ, so many factors differ from the other patients who suffer from depression. So what we should be careful of, or what precautions we should take is, we shouldn't generalize this particular result of the case study to the entire population of depressive patients. Rather, what should we do? We should collect information from so many cases, and then only we can give a generalized result. Okay, so the disadvantage of case study is that we cannot generalize it to the entire population. Note that. Okay. Now, can you see this picture? Yes, everybody? Is it clear? Sana, can you see? Yes, okay. So this person is called Phineas Gage, and this is one of the uh, very interesting study, case study that happened in psychology. And what happened is, this person, he was the chief or the foreman of construction work of a railroad in America. And what happened is, he was working with some of the gunpowders and all, and uh, to work for the construction site, and there were explosives around. And suddenly what happened, when he was working, something exploded, and he was stamping an iron rod, and this thing went through his left cheek. Can you see the picture of the skull? It went through this part and came out of his skull. And some part of his skull was visible outside. But to be frank, this person lived somehow. for almost 12 years after the accident, and he died of epileptic seizures. Like seizures means, have you seen fix? People who have fix. Yes, yeah, he had something similar to that, and he died of that. And what happened is, his some part of his frontal lobe. I told you about four lobes of the brain, right? Frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe. So frontal lobe forms the part of the brain, the front part, and some of this frontal lobe was removed from his the whole brain, and still he managed to live. But the only change that people noticed was his total personality was changed after the accident. So the main results that they got from the study is that frontal lobe was responsible for dealing with the what the personality factors. So if anything happens to our frontal lobe, then our personality changes might occur. And decision making is also the function of decision making. All those factors are mainly dependent on the frontal lobe of our brain. And that is how this particular case study gave us many discoveries or new information to psychology. So it is also of importance to neurobiologists, neuroscientists, and also neuropsychologists, because it involves the brain and the mind and the behaviors and all. So initially, this Phineas Gage, he was a very calm and quiet person. But after the accident, suddenly his personality changed. He became very arrogant, and he started to show several seductive behaviors and all towards others. So a sudden personality change occurred after the damage to the frontal lobe. That's what happened. Can you imagine the iron bar going through this part and coming out of the skull, and still the person surviving? He survived for 12 years. Yes, see Rena's expression. Okay. So that's about the case. Then we'll see the advantages and disadvantages. This you don't have to study for the exam. You don't have it in the textbook, but you just have to know. Okay. Advantages, yes, provides a depth of information from a group member's viewpoint. Unexpected discoveries can be incorporated into research. Can study social behavior, not always feasible with other forms of study. Yes, the first one is provides a depth of information from a group member's viewpoint. So if we are studying a group, we are taking special cases from them, then from their viewpoint, we can learn or we can gain lot of in-depth information. That is one point. Then unexpected discoveries can be incorporated into research, the similar to the one about Phineas Gage. Yeah, we didn't know that the damage to frontal lobe can make so much differences in our decision making process and personality. So after this, after studying this particular case, we understood all that, and we made new discoveries to the field of psychology. So unexpected discoveries might happen after doing case studies. Then, can study social behavior, not always feasible with other forms of study? There is, there are some topics or some phenomena in psychology that cannot be done with the other methods. For example, for some variables, the experimental method might not be feasible, or it might not be practical to conduct experiments. So for that behaviors or for that events, we do case studies in person, selecting particular cases. Now we see the disadvantages. It is difficult to generalize findings from one group to another group, or from one person to the entire group. I told you, when we study a particular case, whether it be a single person or whether it be a single small group of people, we can't generalize the results to the entire population, because we just have a small population or the single person here, and based on that we cannot judge the a whole set of people around the world. There are so many millions and trillions of people around the world. So we can't just give a generalization based on this particular case or this particular small group of people. Then, presence of researcher can influence results. So if we are doing a case study similar to the participant observation, the presence of the person itself can change the results or influence the results in some or the other way. Then it is hard to duplicate. So when we studied the Phineas Gage case study, can we try to duplicate that case? Can we call some other worker from then and pierce one iron bar into his left cheek and try and push it out of the skull and study him again? No. So it is not practical. It's hard to duplicate, and it takes a lot of time too. So studying a case, this Phineas Gage, this particular case, he was subsequently studied for so many years, and that's how we came up with so many results. So it is very time consuming also. So these advantages and disadvantages you just have to know. You don't have to write for the exam, because I didn't find them given as such in your textbook. I just took it from the internet to give you information that these are the advantages and disadvantages. That's all. Now, any doubts about case studies? Did you understand? Yes or no? Yes, Krishma Sana?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand, Sana? Yes. Okay. Amal?
Yes, ma'am.
All fine? Yes. Who else? Ashish? Reina? Yes, Elvina? Maidna?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Where is Aishwarya today? Is she sleeping or what? Okay. Then shall we move on to the next topic? Yes. Next one is analysis of data. So till now, what all did we learn? The goals we learned, the steps we learned. Then we started learning the methods of psychology. We studied observation method, experimental method, survey method. Then what? What else, Amal? Yesterday, what did we learn? What testing?
Validity
Now, what was that about? In which method? What testing?
testing.
Turn the pages. Take your lecture notes and see. Yes.
Reliability.
Yeah, in what did we learn reliability and validity? What testing? There is just a single word between, in front of it. Dash testing.
Survey.
Test. Okay, leave it. Read it and come tomorrow. Okay, Amal. We are finishing today. We'll finish the chapter today. Who would say? Grishma, tell me, what testing did we learn yesterday?
Types of psychological tests.
Psychological test, psychological testing. Psychological testing is another method. Just like observation, experimental survey method, psychological testing is one method. And the last method that we learned today is case study. Okay, with that we have finished the methods in scientific inquiry in psychology. Then we are going to the analysis part. So we have collected data. We have already conceptualized the problem. Then we have collected the data. We have done all sorts of collection. We have done all the procedures. We have applied all the methods. And finally, we want to draw conclusions. So in order to draw conclusions, we have to analyze the data that we have got. Whichever method we have applied, we have got some amount of data in our hands. We have to analyze it in order to understand the result, in order to interpret what the results or the scores mean to us. So we'll see two methods of analysis of data. They are quantitative as well as qualitative methods. We have discussed about quantitative and qualitative methods some or the other place when we studied these two chapters, but we'll see this in depth. First one is quantitative method. As the name suggests, or as you can see in the name itself, name of the method itself, it suggests quantity. There will be a quantitative analysis, means we are analyzing some quantity or some numerical value or using some statistical procedure. Okay, it is a systematic approach to investigations during which numerical data is collected and or the researcher transforms what is collected or observed into numerical data. Write down this definition. I don't think it is there in our textbook. Yes. It is a systematic approach. Systematic approach means it might follow different steps, and it has well-defined steps and procedures to be conducted. So it is a systematic approach to investigations during which, investigations means the research or the studies that we do, during which numerical data is collected and or the researcher transforms what is collected or observed into numerical data. So what we get from the research, that is the data that we get, when we studied the nature of data, we learned that it can occur in various forms, right? You remember, Amal, nature of data? Yes, which all forms can data occur in? No, you don't look, you just tell me what you know. Yesterday you told me about nature of data. Just imagine, if we are using a questionnaire, how do we get? If we are using an experiment, how do we get? If we are using a personal interview, how do we get? Yes, unmute.
Uh, ma'am, by correct. Ma'am, by asking question.
Okay, okay, I'm interviewing you. I asked you questions, and how do I get responses from you? In what form?
Ma'am, maybe by writing forms.
Okay, you fill in the forms, or
Ma'am, telling.
telling means verbal reports will be there.
Yes.
Then if I give you questionnaires to answer, you can give me yes or no answers, or you can score it using rating scales. That is, how much do you like psychology class? Rate from 1 to 10. And you can give me a number. Then how many siblings do you have? So you can give me a number based on that. How old are you? I ask you, and you can give me a number based on that. And that day I asked you to explain about psychology class, right? To describe. And you gave me a verbal report. So that forms a qualitative data, that is descriptive in nature. However, the numbers that you gave me, that is your age, the number of siblings, the class you are studying in, all those factors are numerical in nature, numerical data. So the numerical data can be analyzed using the quantitative method. And even if it is not numerical in nature, say it is yes or no answers. So we convert this yes or no into some other number. So that is, for yes answers, I code it as 0, and for no answers, I code it as 1. So 0, the number 0 means it is a yes answer. The question was answered yes. And if it is 1, I can understand that the participant or the respondent has given me a no for those questions. So in quantitative method of analysis of data, what do we do is, we get the data in a numerical form, so it's very easy for us. Otherwise, we can convert this particular data, that is, if it is true or false questions, or if it is yes or no, if it is right or wrong, if it is agree or disagree, then I can convert it into some form of quantity or numerical value, and then do a quantitative analysis based on that. Understood? So quantitative method of analysis always deals with the numerical data or the statistical procedures. Only with numbers we can do statistical procedures. I hope Sorry. I hope you all are familiar with mean, median, mode and all. Yes, you have studied in lower classes, right? So all those are statistical procedures. And the variability, have you studied variability and all? The scatter diagrams? No. Okay, let it be mean, median, mode. Those things or those techniques are always statistical procedures. Hmm? The mean that we find, the average that we find, all those things can be done only with numbers, right? We can find averages only with numbers. Can we write yes, no, agree, disagree, all that and find the average of it? Yes? No. So what we have to do is we have to convert it into some numerical data and then do an analysis. So in quantitative method, remember two words. One is numerical and the other one is statistical procedures. Okay. Always this will be, the quantitative method will be dealing with the numerical data, or we convert it into numeric, or we convert the data into numerical form and then do the statistical procedures. Apply the statistical procedures, analyze the data. You don't have to worry about the statistical procedures because we have computer techniques and softwares to do that. You just take the data that you have got and just see through it if it is numerical or not. If you think that it is not numerical, then convert it into numerical based on Excel sheets or something like that. Then what we do is we just insert this into the software that we analyze, that we use to analyze, and then we'll just get the results within seconds or minutes. It's as simple as that now. And that's all about quantitative method of analysis. And we have qualitative method of analysis, which is just the opposite of this. If we don't have numerical data, if we can't convert the data into numerical form, then those data will be in descriptive forms. Like when I'm interviewing, I get a verbal report. I'm asking, suppose I'm interviewing a person who has suffered from the flood. He or she has lost so many belongings. He or she lost some of the family members, the house, the area in which he or she was living. There were so many losses that the person has encountered. And finally, after the flood, after this person has undergone several counseling sessions and all, I go there, I conduct a study, and I do an interview. And I am asking him or her, how are you feeling now? Can you explain about the experience, the flood experience? How was it? How devastating was it? What all things did you lose? So this person would be narrating the incidents to me, right? Like a story. The flood came this day, the water level rose this day, my parents were here, my family members were there, we didn't know about this, the power went off, I didn't have charge in my phone, I didn't know about the news, I went to the camp, I lost my house. All these factors are descriptive in nature, so I can't quantify them, right? So from these things I'll have to find out common themes. Common themes means he or she might tell me, I lost my house, I lost my vehicle, I lost my car, I lost my scooter, I lost my kid's bicycle. So these are the losses that comes under the what category? The facilities category. So I find a common theme and I put all these under this category, facilities, loss of facilities or loss of belongings. And then he or she talks to me about different feelings that he or she has. That is, I feel sorrow, I feel sad, I feel grief about people who have died, I feel hopeless about future, I feel helpless about future. So I put all these things under the theme feelings or emotions. So from all the responses that this person tells me, I find common themes and patterns and I arrange them accordingly. And then I analyze these writings or these verbal reports from the person. That is how qualitative analysis is done. We don't use any statistical procedures in this. And I told you, when we use quantitative methods, we can get results within seconds or minutes. But qualitative method, the researcher has to intensively work and find out the common themes and patterns, and then come to a conclusion. Understood? So we'll just read through this. It is the range of processes and procedures whereby we move from the qualitative data, that is non-numerical data, that have been collected into some form of explanation, understanding or interpretation of the people and situations we are investigating. So as I told you, whatever topic we are studying, we get an explanation, we get a description based on that. From that, we derive all these themes and patterns, and try to undergo the qualitative form of analysis. In quantitative procedure, we have numerical data, we have statistical procedures, but here we have non-numerical data, which will be in the form of verbal reports or writings or whatever it is, and then we find common themes and patterns, and the researcher is the one who analyzes it. We can't use any computer techniques for that. Understood? Yes. And there are several methods of qualitative analysis. Two methods are mentioned in your textbook. One is narrative analysis, one is content analysis. Narrative analysis is something that I told you right now. That is, the person keeps on telling stories and narratives, and from that we find important points, put them into themes and patterns, and finally we come up with an interpretation of the results. And in content analysis, what it means is, as the name suggests, the content is analyzed. That is, we might have certain observation reports, we might have already got some interview reports from some other person, we might have got some novels or case diaries, or we might have got the personal diaries, the diary entries. We analyze that qualitatively. We analyze the content in it. That is content analysis. I'll read through the definition. A narrative analysis is the method used to analyze content from various sources such as interviews of respondents, observations from the field, or surveys. It focuses on using the stories and experiences shared by people to answer the research questions. So from these stories and experiences told by people, we derive some conclusions. Whereas in content analysis, what we do is, we already have some form of documents, that is in the form of images or videos or texts, or in the form of novels, in the form of writings, in the form of case diaries or personal diaries. We all have documents to analyze. So we analyze the content of those documents. That is what happens in the content analysis. And yes, that's all about the two methods, that is quantitative as well as qualitative method of analysis. It's almost time. Do you have any doubts? Anybody? Have you understood both the methods? Yes, Ashish? Yes, Sana, are you able to follow? Okay.
Yes,
Then,
ma'am.
okay, fine. Then we'll see in the next class. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.